And welcome back to another Gutter Fighting Secrets Tactical Podcast. Today we're joined by my jiu-jitsu instructor, Jon Helwig of AMA Fight Club in Whippany, New Jersey. And I am thrilled to have you on, Jon. I know that you and I have done a couple of training videos in the past, but first time that you're actually on the official tactical podcast since we started it a few months back. So, Jon, welcome to the program, bro.
Thanks. Well, I really am glad to be back here. I know this is, I think we said our third. We did a couple training videos in person, a sit-down interview, everything. So this is really cool. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you on, man. It's been fucking rough, dude, like not being able to train and just like sitting around getting fat and like just feeling like an asshole over here, man.
Highest, embarrassed to say, I saw the highest scale weight. I have actually old friends and acquaintances who used to consider scale weight the most important thing in the world. Not how you looked, which is most people these days, not what you could do results, but they lived and died by scale weight. So by that metric, you know, I was a mess the first 8 weeks. We closed right in the middle of March, was the last class we were able to have at AMA, and 8 straight weeks, man, of just total turmoil, a lot of bad thoughts, a lot of frustration. Just you get discouraged, and everybody takes it out, you know, differently. I was never a drinker, never a drugger. But, you know, you're sitting home and what you hear a lot, especially not just fighters, but actually I've heard the worst is with swimmers. Your appetite does not kind of dip down to match your activity level for quite a bit after you go from super, you know, hyperactive to sedentary. So people that are used to do, and I mean, typical hard professional level jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai training session could be burning like 700 calories in a 1 hour training session. So you're doing that 5 to 6 days a week when you're, you know, in it to win it. And then you get suddenly cut off with whether it's an injury or a problem. And now we have this state shutdown. It's not like after 2-3 days, your appetite goes down to sedentary. You know, for weeks, you still have that, you know, that drive to refuel. And then as the engine starts dying down and the appetite stays up, you can do some damage to yourself, man.
Dude, yeah, it's been no joke, man. And I keep hearing that from, you know, various martial artists out there is like, I just don't know what's happening. But, you know, even doing some bro lifts and stuff like that, it's just, it can't compare to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I think the amount of people that either we're always thinking about some type of home training setup, whether it was fitness or a little area for martial arts matting, tons of them just, you know, in panic mode, were putting together whatever they could, because if you can't go out, you can't meet up with people, it's a nightmare. If you're going to be at home anyway, you know, doing push-ups on a carpeted floor or jogging around the block isn't going to cut it for the type of fix that our crew needs. So people who have that have been able to get by. I see a lot of like, you know, makeshift dummies people are constructing, or some people had bought those like $500-600 dummies with the limbs you can torque up and stuff. But this is, you know, this is something very, very few people ever imagined. Some of the guys from my peer group would talk about like, you know, I have this weird nightmare once or twice a year. All my students quit at the same time, or my school gets found to have like toxic mold or some environmental concern, and all the students are gone and we can't train. And not ever did I ever hear anybody, man, in 16 years talk about, well, what if the state just tells every gym owner you're not allowed to run your business, go bankrupt? And literally that's like not even an exaggeration or hyperbole. It's just like, don't run your business and we'll let you know when that changes. So it's nuts. It's you feel like you're in a bad movie.
Yeah. So what's your make on this whole thing, man? I mean, did this freaking thing come out of a lab? Was it a freaking bat? Like, what do you think happened?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting to the point. I'm still not there. I give my opinion and mouth off on a lot of stuff that I probably would be better served not to. I don't have anything beyond, you know, what you hear on the news, and to get into any conspiracies or anything else. I mean, if you were going to go the route, which I really don't, of imagining, you know, some type of engineered chaos or anything else like that, while there's something to be said for how disastrous this had been, real nefarious, bad people of that mindset, you probably wouldn't look at something that has sky high contagious level and also super high survivability level. Not that people haven't died, not to undermine in any way the seriousness of it, but you would probably have something that had, super high contagious and a super high, kill rate and acted very, very quickly, stuff like that. So I think this is, we heard all the different stuff over the years. I mean, I can remember off the top of my head, there was, previous swine flus and bird flu, and there was British mad cow and foot and mouth and SARS, this and everything. And hantavirus was getting hot in the news for a little bit. And this, apparently is, from what I'm hearing, by far the worst for contagiousness. And with the low, it takes something like 2 weeks before some people even manifest symptoms. And that whole time you can be spreading it. So this is, something like out of a Tom Clancy novel, but weird in that, statistically, if you're a person who's scientific minded, it's crazy high survivability, yet you're seeing, and I'm, coming around to realizing how you can't, take chances and dismiss stuff based on, the tough guy. Well, I'm young, I'm active, I've been through worse mentality that unfortunately is rampant in martial arts. You push hard as hell, you're operating in any given time on a number of injuries that would have a lot of normal people, going to see a specialist or thinking they were, up Schitt's Creek as far as, how's this ever going to get better? And that for you is just like, hey, that's a Tuesday session, I'm expected to perform. But people in their 30s, no underlying conditions apparently, otherwise healthy, losing their life to this. So it's something where, as passionate as we are, you certainly can't fault anyone for saying, you know what, I'm going to lose months of technical progress, set my conditioning back. It might be, some point in the middle of next year before they're back at the level of performance, which is horrifying for someone who not even necessarily is a professional athlete, but is someone who's invested years in their craft. That's really scary. But at the same time, this affects more than just me or you or how we feel. So it's uncharted territory as far as I'm concerned.
I'm glad to hear you put it like that, man. There's been so many guys out there, like you're saying, with that tough guy attitude. But, when it comes down to it, it is what it is, I think, right? And, yeah, there's a high survivability rate and everything, but this is nonetheless like a pandemic. And, I had Stephen Kessling on a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying the same thing. Like, yeah, it sucks. Like, you're going to lose all your conditioning and everything. But, like, would you rather get this thing and, like, have some heart complications later in life? You just don't know at this point.
Right. And he's got a phenomenal perspective, just for how long he's not only been around, but for how much he's always stayed in the mindset of a student, not just technically always looking to improve and learn from other people, but just his overall perspective, on life. I followed a lot of his videos, both when I was coming up the ranks, but also even now when people come up to me and say, oh, I want to, do more. I want to study online. I want to do everything. I tell them, and very few follow this, of course, because it's human nature, and I'm a man of extremes myself. But I tell them, you're not going to do yourself any favors as a newer, full of enthusiasm white belt, hopping online and doing, upside down reverse gopher guard and, berimbolo to double arm break with your feet. You want to focus on the basics. And he's got just the right, I think, format of the video duration, the rate he speaks. He doesn't give you 14 details for a basic position. He's focusing on getting you, for the most part, from that novice to qualified beginner level. And he's got, plenty of content for intermediate and advanced grapplers as well, but he's still the go-to when people come to me and say, hey, point me in the right direction starting out. So for him to say that, he's absolutely right, I think. And also, even beyond yourself, even if you're a high risk, high reward guy who says, I'm going for it, I don't care, that's great. It's going to affect other people. So the fact that you're going to be, around, elderly relatives or a spouse who's going to have, different genetic makeup than you, different susceptibility, other stuff like that, it puts us all in a really morally kind of tough position, because most of the guys from my generation coming up in this, the mindset was anything that doesn't paralyze or kill me is worth pushing through. Those two obviously aren't going to lead to a successful martial arts career if you're paralyzed or dead, but things like that of rashes, infections, guys are getting staph, ringworm, you're getting torqued up, really hurt and strained. That was, you kind of signed on the dotted line, whether consciously or subconsciously for those things. But in this case, I mean, the industry is literally crippled. If you thought of something that could hurt the momentum and the progress of the jiu-jitsu and MMA community, especially in our tri-state area, I mean, I couldn't imagine something worse than this.
So how do guys stay, I mean, in shape, if at all? Like, how do you keep your conditioning up enough so that one day, okay, we can open again, here we go. Like, you won't go back and like die the first day of a heart attack.
Sure. No, that's an absolutely valid and really good question. I think just from life experience, I would say if you're a guy who's, 20 years old, you're essentially going to come back. You're going to have 2 hard sessions where you feel like you're at death's door, and you'll be in a week or two pretty close to where you were, even on an extended layoff. Unfortunately, grapplers that are now, we have tons of people at AMA, forget, in the 30 to 40 range, but we have a vibrant 40 and up and even a 50 and up group. Not so much there's not like a 70 to 80 crew that, unlocks the place and kicks each other's ass, but we definitely have some of the other ones that I mentioned, and it is something where you have to resist the urge. It's like we talk about somebody who's been underwater at super, super low depths. The pressure, if you, what's the classic example? If you just rush to the surface, I think they call it the bends, that can be life-threatening. You got to acclimate. It's the same thing. So when we're up and running at the new AMA facility, you're going to hear stuff from me you've literally never heard in your life, where I'm going to say, we do not want to see you having, the first 2 weeks back, tooth and nail battles where every grip, every position, you're fighting life and death. Not because we're going to permanently change the mindset. I mean, that's been our iconic reputation for quite a while now, but because people are going to have, blood pressure through the roof, trembling hands. It's going to be dangerous for you to hop on the highway and drive home afterwards because your blood vessels, your lungs, your heart, you're just way, way out of condition. So it's a good opportunity, and I've already started, lightly kind of penciling in, nothing set in stone, some of the curriculum for when we get back, but it's a good time not only to refocus on review and basics, but tweak some stuff, have fun with it, make it so that rather than a head-to-head, me versus you, every round for the kill, it can be, hey, let's get back into it, make sure we remember, how my hips move this way, what the goal of this position is, and keep it really productive, because it's uncharted territory. The longest layoff I ever had, if I wasn't injured or medically told, you had this procedure done, or this is so severe you need to take this time off from a doctor, the most I ever in 16 plus years would take off would be 1 solid week. After a fight, you relax, you go around, you hang out with your friends, you get that, re-swelling of energy like an overcharged battery, and then you get back to it, and the week really helps with inflammation. To be off for 7 straight days is unheard of during active training, so you treat yourself to that. But this is like, this is like a crazy new season of a show where you thought you knew what was going to happen, and now they spun, the fans' expectations on their head.
When we find a place that's the right fit for us. I mean, what are we looking for in a new school that we
got a cheat sheet over there? These are really good questions. And that most of us, I mean, I certainly didn't think that when I was starting out, and I actually spent the first couple years at a school that, in retrospect, it was never the right fit for me. And at the time, even once that became clear, it was like, oh man, I'm friends with these people. I know that I got the drive in my GPS. It feels kind of weird. Martial arts has this strange blend of you're paying for a service, but there's also this almost, wouldn't say religious level of devotion, but there's definitely something you don't feel bad at all when you stop going to your retro fitness and switch to Lifetime. But why is it with martial arts there's that kind of pressure, awkwardness? I would say the first thing to do, and this can be tough and kind of vulnerable and revealing, think about what your actual goals are and be honest. If you're someone who is doing this as a completely casual hobby, for example, the way somebody might show up at a park to shoot hoops every now and then. You're not, setting up a league. You're not doing custom jerseys, and you're not, getting there early to do 53 throws to make sure you're warm. It's something to do with the guys that Bluff's team. That is perfectly fine. If that's your approach to martial arts, you don't want a school where the instructor's trying to live vicariously through you and say, we're going to do 8 tournaments this year, Will. And you're like, I'm going to come once a week at most. I don't feel like going out and getting, killed in a tournament you got to find the right fit.
Not everyone at AMA is a pro MMA fighter, but we do have pro MMA fighters, and Bilson is one of them. And Bilson is he's a machine, man. Like, he is crazy.
It's funny because we've seen just over the years. I mean, the AMA school started in 2004. So Mike Constantino, I mean, forget year by year, expanding and enhancing the skills and the talent level. I mean, almost month by month, definitely quarter by quarter, we were bringing in. I mean, we had in training sessions, Division I wrestlers brought in. We had black belts from Brazil. The owner himself was letting guys sleep in his basement, crash on my couch. Guys who were barely fluent would rely on him and trust him. And he'd say, I'm going to do right by you. I'm going to, give you really good training access, and you decide what you want to do. And some guys took him up on it. Other guys said, hey, that's cool, but I'm going to stick with jiu-jitsu. So we had the D1 wrestler crowd, jiu-jitsu black belts from Brazil. We had a group, Will, of absolute just animals in terms of the most physical group I've ever trained with was the crew from Dagestan, Chechnya, that area, that actually included a young Khabib before too many people realized, because he was so humble, so soft-spoken, wasn't saying, hey, check out my record, I'm undefeated, anything, was just focused on training. And that crew, Khabib, Adlan Amagov, Vyacheslav, he went by Slava. I can't remember off the top of my head his last name. A little bit of Rustam Chisayev, a couple appearances from him. But just, if you want to talk about sheer physicality, and then I'll connect this to Wilson because he's not from that area, but it's the same type of like a traumatic flashback. Like you see somebody and they see something that gives them like a Vietnam flashback, and they just like take off and go into a trance. But that's what happened with Wilson. So that crew, if you ever, I don't know if you're a big video gamer. I haven't been able to play well in years, but I used to be, I grew up, I was a couch potato. I wasn't forget combative athlete. I wasn't even like a team sport athlete, but I played a ton of video games. And I always make the analogy when people come up to me after training with Wilson, and they just look on their face like they don't know up from down. They don't know if they're going to be able to drive home, not because he hurts them, but like their mind is blown. It would be like if you were opening doors looking for the doctor's office, and you're like, nope, this is a closet. Nope, this is a bathroom. And then one of the doors you open, and you saw, like, if you ever saw the movie Men in Black, you see like a giant alien spider, a little creature, and they're just like, how's it going, Will? And you're just like, you just back away slowly like Homer in the bushes, and you're just like, I can't process my life. I've seen things that if I didn't see them, I honestly would not believe it. If you told me, Will, with your credibility and your the passion you have to be honest about the martial arts, if you told me the things that I have seen about Wilson, that you saw them yourself, I would say, Will, you must be confused about either how much he weighs or the other guy's credentials, because it's like world breaker level absurd. It looks like one of those Marvel movies where it's CGI and the little guy's like twirling the big guy, Hulk Loki. It couldn't happen with the physics. But anyway, the Dagestan Chechnya crew, it was like the video game system where you create a character, right? So you want to create a character in, let's say, a fighting game, and they're going to have, speed, strength, stamina, flexibility, all the different attributes, I'll jump in rounds with him, and some of the stuff he does, some of the difficulties he's given me, it's stuff where I've never had someone anywhere close to his size have the speed of learning, the innovation to, if something worked against him once, it's not even worth it for me to try it, honestly, a week later. That's how quickly he's learning, because he's a smart guy, and he, communicates very well in English. He's very fluent and personable, but he has that, I'm not 100% sure if Albania is Eastern Europe, but I'll say that Eastern Europe sporting mindset where you as a coach dictate to him, he accepts that you have his best interests at heart, and until what you tell him isn't effective, he's going to commit to that and execute. And that for me is a very easy type of arrangement, because there aren't, you have split seconds to make decisions in combat. There isn't time for self-doubt or, well, my coach said this, but I heard on a YouTube video that. I mean, you got to have that trust. And his head coach, who runs all of his training, decides who he spars with, where he goes, what time he, when his rest periods are, when his lunch, when his breaks are, everything is actually Charles Chumba, who I know you know and have trained with at least a little bit. And Charles and him are a great match in the sense of Charles will explain to him what we're doing, why he has to break a certain habit that he's been seeing develop. And he tells him, these are the consequences and everything. But the trust is such that even if Charles didn't give him, a PowerPoint presentation on, if you lead to the body without setting up the body shot, this, Wilson knows there's a trust in place where it's only in his best interest. No one is trying to make it about that. I grew up in traditional martial arts from 5 to 17. I did traditional Korean karate, Tang Sudo, and then eventually the name was changed to Subakdo. So one of the things where people they say, oh, well, I'm sure all that karate helped you. And unfortunately, the lack of contact. You're either aiming to miss or aiming to lightly touch the uniform. The focus of scoring points with strikes versus doing damage or making it so the person can't continue, all those things actually hindered at least the striking portion. The flexibility was great. The discipline, the learning how to learn was all great. The actual hand-to-hand fighting, because there was never any hard resistance, and the most competitive thing you did was the light touch or no touch sparring, which is pretty tough to get nervous or scared by. After you do it a couple times, you realize the guy will get in trouble if he really, kicks you right in the stomach or ever hit you in the face. I think in all the 11 years or something like that, I remember twice somebody got hit. And the crazy thing, which I couldn't even really conceptualize at the time, the times the people did get hit, both were advanced black belt or Dan rank equivalent of black belt. And both people were on the ground crying, really upset. And these were adults in their 30s or 40s. And it wasn't anything malicious where some young gun in their 20s, uncorked one and broke their eye socket. It was people who had just never been hit before, and they were scared. When a little kid kind of falls and you're made out of rubber at 3 years old, and you're usually more scared and upset than hurt. But I mean, these people had their entire worldview rocked, and then they were kind of embarrassed. So seeing a grown man or a grown woman of 30 and 40 as a third-degree black belt crying because somebody, cracked them with a quick back fist or something in the sniffer is pretty crazy. But what I did better that I not only don't see, but I think you're probably never going to see, just based on the different parameters of jiu-jitsu and MMA, the character and the way people carried themselves. Now, first of all, I want to preface that there's all kinds of awful people in the traditional martial arts. You have the worst scandals, the worst, actual crimes. By no means does jiu-jitsu or MMA have a monopoly, or there's any big difference in terms of bad people. But the attitudes allowed on the mat, and some people say, well, that's disingenuous. You should let people be as good or as bad as they are. But the overall conduct and discipline of the class in a traditional karate setting, I mean, was great. If you were 5 minutes late to class, you were terrified. You were going to be on your knuckles doing push-ups. You were respectful. You didn't chit-chat. You concentrated. You bowed in. You bowed out. With jiu-jitsu and MMA, some schools do kind of have that. But in general, the casualness, I mean, you'll see instructors with profanity on the mat. You'll see people, interrupting. One guy's, looking out the window. Another guy's running over to answer his cell phone as the jiu-jitsu coach, the MMA coach. So it's very casual and lax, which, again, my bias might be because I grew up in that. But I think even if you compare them side by side, there's something to be said. Do you want to be teaching people, by far in jiu-jitsu and MMA, the most devastatingly effective combat options hand-to-hand that could really hurt people, if they're also going to be the most casual and there's no code of ethics, there's no morals, there's no anything being discussed other than here's the right way to break an arm? It's arguably better in some contexts to teach outdated, aki jutsu or hapkido moves that would probably be unlikely to actually choke somebody. If you're not going to tell people, you're expected to only use this in a street scenario to defend yourself, to defend your family, you get a lot more guys in jiu-jitsu and MMA who go out to a club, start trouble. No, in the back of my mind, if you've been training for, 8 years at a good school and you're physically fit, it's not too likely somebody you start trouble with in public, as long as it stays hand to hand and you don't get yourself in a horrible scenario with a knife or a gun. It's unlikely they're just going to like surprise you and kick your ass. And then people start thinking, hey, I can act like a thug. I can go to the beach and, harass somebody. You hear all those classic stories about like surfers on the beach, who knows how much of that really happened. But at the end of the day, my goal is I want our students to be able to absolutely dominate on the mat. Whether you're training at our school, whether we have a guest, whether you go to a tournament, you visit someone else, whatever the context, I want you to feel that your technical ability, your mental fortitude, your cardio, every aspect lets you absolutely dominate. Because there's no fun in learning this stuff and drilling the moves and investing years if it doesn't work when you need it. I want that to be at the best it can, but I also want to have students where they are trustworthy. I can say, I'm never going to get a call that someone who's an AMA student, assaulted someone that they didn't like and waited for, because that's really against what we're about, because we're still as refined as we are and all the differences. And we like to think, hey, we're not doing, katas in line anymore. We're not, hitting our hand 100 times against, a keem bag for timing. We're doing a makawara. We're doing the techniques that work the most effectively, but we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And most of the people who laid the foundations, this was as much about the character development and the lessons that you'll take for life. And it doesn't have to be either or. And while I'm not interested in doing, outdated self-defense drills any more than most of the people are, I don't want students to think that this is just, something where, hey, show me how to hurt a guy. Okay, I'll come back if I need it. I want this to be a long-term development where you gain way more than just, this is the way to do a move,
That's one thing, again, I like about your teaching style, John, is it's very traditional martial arts as far as the discipline is concerned, mixed with, modern hand-to-hand combatives. And for the guys and girls out there listening, you walk into class late more than once, John's going to call you on it. I've been sitting there with the freaking 300-pound guy on my rib cage, and I yell, oh, shit. And John comes, no cursing on the mat, man. Like, it's all in good sport, but I really think that extra discipline adds to learning retention and all of that, just, being a better warrior.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's not for everyone. And I feel like because there's, like I said, when I started, you were unlikely, and it was considered unrealistic to say, I'm not going to train unless it's from a black belt, because there were only 3 in the whole state. And if you were 2+ hours away, other than occasional trips, you couldn't make a 4-hour round trip every night. I mean, you could, and some psychos did, and I respect that. But in general, that was unrealistic. Now there's literally a black belt on every corner. So we've had people, we have overall very good retention. But we've had people where they train at AMA and it's not where they're looking for, and they know they can probably go 10 minutes north, south, east, or west and try a different school. And we've had a lot of people who've left some of the schools that I'm friendly with. We've had someone come over and we don't give them a hard time and say, hey, so what, we're better than them. It's you vote with your attendance. And a lot of people think they vote with their intentions, and they say like, yeah, I'm going to sign up for private lessons and I'm going to do this. And like, because I told you I'm going to do that and drew up, a schedule, in 6 months, I'm going to wake up and be like, a human weapon, right? It's like, well, no, you'd have to actually show up. And then when you show up, you got to actually pay attention. You got to actually do it. So I always try and balance performance with, what is really at the core of what the person's knowledge is. A lot of instructors go the route that I can't support of all that matters is attendance and theoretical knowledge in your head. If you've taken 1,000,000 classes and you seem to know the moves and you can drill them, decently, you're at that belt, even if you can't make the techniques work against someone your size, your rank, and your age, which, I really just couldn't support, even if it is the better business long-term mindset, because nobody doesn't like being promoted. But the analogy I constantly go back to, and until I hear someone with a good refutation of it, I'm going to keep repeating. If I decide to pursue chess, I'm going to play consistently 2-3 times a week. I'm going to buy instructionals. I'm going to go to chess clubs. I'm going to talk to people about chess. The World Chess Federation is under no obligation after 10 years to rank me as a grandmaster of chess. It's not about just sticking around. It's not about just doing your best. It's whatever grandmaster might be, like a 1700 chess ranking score. I don't know that legit, but there is a clear criteria. You either are or you aren't. So in that case, you're very thankful that not everybody who applies to law school and puts in their 4 years gets a license to practice law. You're very happy not everyone gets a license to practice medicine, et cetera, et cetera. I know for myself, I could spend 10 years in a PhD doctorate course on, organic chemistry. I don't have what it takes. I don't have the mindset. I wouldn't be able to absorb that. That doesn't mean I can't learn a hell of a lot more than I knew. Doesn't mean I can't get tremendous benefit from that. But they don't owe me, out of obligation, that certification. So it doesn't mean every black belt is a world level competitor. It doesn't mean every black belt can beat every brown belt. But it means if you don't have the criteria of a black belt, I think it's a mistake in the direction I've seen a lot of my peers and the industry as a whole. It's certainly not isolated of a phenomenon. Go is essentially we're in the to use a popular buzzword, we're in the late stages and the final stages of the jiu-jitsu black belt being iconic and being different from the traditional martial arts black belt. It's starting to become and probably is going to be within the next, definitely the next 5 years. If I could say the next, 3 to 5, it's going to be, hey, my cousin, my uncle, my so-and-so is a black belt. And you say, well, certainly not a jiu-jitsu black belt. What are they black belt in karate? No, jiu-jitsu. Okay, Japanese jiu-jitsu, no, Brazilian jiu-jitsu under this school. And you look it up and they are, it's going to tend to drift more towards they started at a club, they stuck around and kept paying, and they didn't quit. And whether they ever reach black belt proficiency, black belt knowledge, execution of technique or not, their instructor wants to keep them, and he's gonna do some interesting mental gymnastics to justify it, but he's gonna hand them black belt. And I personally think it's not only bad for the art as a whole, but I actually think it's bad for the student as well, because the worst thing you can do to somebody is give them a false confidence or give them the insult of lowered expectations. I can make up a prize for my child who does, wrestling. And I can say, you're so improved. I've never seen someone improve more. Here's a trophy. I've made this or that. But I can't tell them, you are an All-American. If you didn't finish, I believe it's top 8. That's a status. That's a level of proficiency and accomplishment. If you didn't, you're not, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you should have never wrestled. But a lot of people do that. And I personally, and I say this, it might sound disingenuous, but I did not know for sure that I was ever going to get promoted to black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Personally, I was doing so much striking, so much strength and conditioning, so much no-gi, which now there's kind of shifty no-gi rankings that are really popular. And a lot of schools that offer them produce very good no-gi people. But the idea of a colored t-shirt or a belt that you're never going to wear because it's got if you don't train in the gi, which I didn't for the first several years, you're going to become, eventually an expert world-class, no-gi competitor for the people that reach that level. But you'll certainly become, an advanced grappler after 10 years if you train consistently and are healthy. But that isn't the same as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. The things you can get away with, and that I did for the first several years of simply, rocketing somebody off with pure power or relying on the slipperiness of sweat to slip out, are not going to cut it when someone is controlling you and using the techniques. And likewise, you're not going to develop the offense, even if you have very little interest in gi manipulation. And it's a love or hate thing. You either can't wait to be whipping out the lapels and, gripping all over the place, or you are annoyed when a guy does that and are like, how's this going to help you if somebody attacks? But at the end of the day, it means something. If I go to, I always joke because I did Muay Thai for about, probably, I want to say 9 years, really, really consistently. And at the time, the whole armband rankings, that wasn't really a thing. It was about, are you getting better? How do you look on the pads? How do you look at sparring? Your instructor is going to let you know if you're ready to fight or not. But if I went to, Gunsak Sorplo and Jidar, world champion from Thailand's classes, if I just, kept my hands super tight to my temples, threw no kicks, charged in on people with boxing footwork and blasted them with punches, it's not like he's going to tell me, oh, your Muay Thai is awesome, because I'm doing almost none of what he's teaching. If there's 8 weapons, 2 hands, 2 elbows, 2 knees, 2 feet, and I'm using 2 of them, even if I'm using them very effectively and I'm being an effective striker, that might be my skill set for MMA on the feet, but that doesn't mean he's going to jump out with, blue and purple armbands for me because I'm finding a way to hack the system. So it's really about, I think, being honest with yourself and realizing as an instructor, you're not under an obligation to provide what is essentially the highest ranking of ability, because beyond black belt, the advanced degrees, the red and black belt, or the red grandmaster, those aren't about you couldn't beat this guy or this or that or getting better. Your knowledge is certainly gaining, but black belt is the last one that's really a clear jump from the previous in terms of combat proficiency.
Speaking about combat proficiency, you actually finished, was it your last fight, with a broken eye socket?
Second to last.
Second to last fight with a broken eye socket.
Getting beaten up and getting hurt not only wears you out, it makes you surprisingly tired, even if you're not exerting that much physical energy and accomplishing much, but psychologically, you're not going to feel like, is it even worth shooting and holding the leg as they're sprung? You're a bucket with a hole in it that's just draining. If you got 1 million gallons in your bucket, 1 million gallons is just leaking out at a very quick rate. So you have to realize that physically, and I know we just talked about how Wilson physically is just so different, but physically, most of the A-tier fighters are not the exact same, but within the same general levels of unbelievably strong, unbelievably fast, unbelievably flexible. The biggest variety you would see, to circle back to your question about getting the mindset of, could you be a competitor? Is this going to be something you're successful at? The mental differences are massive. I mean, you have guys fighting in the UFC. The word is out. If this guy has a bad start, you could drop your hands and close your eyes. He couldn't knock you out. He will find a way to lose. He is a paper tiger, or whatever term you want to use, a front runner. He either wins from the start or he can't come back. And then you have other people where they're extremely tough, they're extremely rugged, but deep down, they feel psychologically that they are a guy who's there for the life journey. They are there to try and get the 50,000 fight of the night bonus. They don't believe they're worthy to be a contender or be a champion. They believe that the other person just inherently has cut so much more weight, has canceled. And in a fight, there's going to be stuff, whether it's minor, like the referee missed a foul, the guy hit me low, or major of, man, the guy smashed my eye socket in the first minute of the first round. This isn't what they told me was going to happen. This isn't what we prepared for. Those gut check moments, Will, you never, ever are going to rise to the occasion and be better or deliver more than you ever have in a training or preparational aspect. You will only fall to whatever level you have held yourself accountable to. So the good news, and there's bad news, the good news with that is you can prepare for the unreasonable. Let's say you're in class and now you've been training, you said 3.5 years, you know your strongest positions, you know the moves that deliver for you. If you hit that damn straight ankle you love on 5 white belts in a row, and you could do it again on 5 new white belts the next day, but you say to yourself, man, I can only do it when it's their left foot. I'm going to make myself do it on the other side. Something as simple as that, when the person is great at defending it on your strong side, and you have that ace up your sleeve, or you've been injured and the hand that usually grabs it can't do it and you got to use it. Those are the moments where if you fall to the occasion, you're going to understand why it happened. And nobody gets good fast. Yes, people progress way faster than others, but you have to be willing to train for months and years on end consistently, even if you're not getting any financial reward, even if people aren't, clapping for you, you don't have some, off the hook Instagram like Wilson does. You have to put in the long-term mindset, because you might get matched up against someone with your amount of training time, way more, way less. There's no way to know, but no matter what, you have to defeat that person. You can't say, hey, everybody, I lost, I looked awful, I got, knocked out, submitted, whatever, lost by 20 to zip, but I found out, the guy was training for much longer than I have, so it's cool. That mindset is toxic, and I see that all the time. Not that I want somebody, devastated and unable to move on in their life if they take one loss by any means, but you have to treat this as this is a safe, controlled environment where I can be so damn far out of my comfort zone that if I had, binoculars, I couldn't see it, because that will help me in so many other areas of life. And it sounds melodramatic, but the amount of people that say to me, either in private or write testimonials or whatever, the constant theme is they say, I never imagined a million years, Will, that from doing the training I did at AMA, I will be a better employee at my job, or a better business owner if I am self-employed, a better father, I can deal with stress so much better. When somebody cuts me off in traffic, when we had a power outage, when we had this, and some of the stuff they say is bizarre, and I'm like, I don't even see how that connects. And I realize, hey, with what they have on their plate, that is how they're expressing, the common universal sentiment, which I felt as well. There are things that when I was, in my teens and stuff, I would flip out about, that it's not just age and maturity. I'd still be flipping out now at, 35 if I hadn't gone through these experiences. If something happens that stinks or is inconvenient or frustrates or disappoint me, it's nowhere near as bad as having, Adlan Amagov spin kicking you in the liver with his heel with a laser target on it going in between two ribs, and he knew exactly where your arm was and still did it, and you knew it was coming, and you're not going to fall because you don't want to give him the satisfaction, but you kind of need to make sure the wall's nearby in case like you're about to just collapse. And that wasn't like, hey, everybody stop and clap and get, that's like literally, that's a Wednesday striking class at the golden age of AMA, and you're expected to either, you're going to quit the practice and go home, or you're going to pull yourself back together and be ready round, 2. And those moments, they don't go away just because, I don't right now do, power headshot stand-up sparring anymore. I'm focused on training and teaching jiu-jitsu full time, but that stays with you, man. The reason that victories are so awesome in competition, you can't confuse good training days. And some guys are like, no, it's not the same. Some people, the reason they never compete is for them, they're getting most of the satisfaction and whatever accolades or stuff they're getting from just training. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, as long as you recognize that that's not the same as competing. If you think it's more or less the same, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. But victories are forever. You can have 100 million things go wrong, but once you've entered a tournament and won your division, once you've entered a cage fight and been victorious, you can't go back and lose that accomplishment. And you keep that, and kind of Highlander style, when you take the other guy out and absorb his energy, that builds, that confidence and that mindset of being wired for victory builds. And if you do that consistently, you can do things above and beyond what you imagine. So those are the things I would say I look for. Of course, we want an athlete that could rip a sink out of a wall and do 10 backflips, and there's all these crazy stats like we were saying. But at the end of the day, a Wilson tier athlete with a pay less mindset is not someone that we could do very much with, even with our track record.
So what is next for AMA? We're expanding. We're going to be moving to a new location. What comes next? After the pandemic's finished.
This is regular, even if it's not what people wants to hear. So in the next, couple weeks, we're going to start putting out there when the next wave, hopefully, of updates from the state comes in. The first one was just awful. It was unworkable. It was, try to open your new business or your existing business for the people that still have their same locations at 25% capacity. No one can have any contact. You can have one person, in the corner hitting the bag while wearing a mask, and somebody else can try doing armbar on a dummy, but you can't train that way. And that's, again, insulting. And then there was crazy stuff I saw from some of the really big corporate gyms, the gyms that have, 50, 100 locations worldwide. They're saying, like, you're going to build a dummy at home according to, specs you download. And it's like a couch cushion and some pool noodles, and that you wrap in legit, I couldn't make this up if I tried. You're going to wrap that in an old gi. Then you're going to show up and you're going to change into your gi in the car. Now, obviously, you would just tell people, change at home and drive there. You wouldn't tell people, try and change in their car. And then they're going to map out 6 feet, because they got, huge gyms. So you might be able to fit a ton of people, even 6 feet apart. And then the instructor's going to have his own dummy, and he's going to, show the move on the dummy, and you're going to cut. And it's like, listen, at the end of the day, there's being dedicated, there's working through hardships. And then there's just, there's a level of absurdity where no one's like, hey, man, I got really good those 3 months we were fighting the dummy. What are we doing? I'd rather you just, get the members together and, watch instructionals, talk, keep a positive thing. Some people are doing some training, like what you and I are using now on, what is this, Zoom, or FaceTime or whatever. And you can absolutely, supplement in the downtime, but you got to remember what got you to the level you're at. You get good by resisting the other person's techniques and energy and strength, and feeling the subtleties and the sensitivity of, training at live. And our style of live is at 100% resistance. That's why you develop the effectiveness you do, because, if you do the move and it's like, the other person, I watch some footage because I want to know, where are we lacking and what are other schools doing better than us, so we can offer better and better instruction as the years go by. You watch some of these videos, and the people that are training, it almost looks like, I'm like, is this school I'm watching, is their training taking place underwater? Everything's super slow, and it's not like an exercise, like a flow drill, less training. It's literally like people just aren't giving a very good effort. And, if you have me in an arm bar, I'll, nonchalantly grab my free hand, and then as you pull, I'll let go and tap. And like, what about when the guy locks a thumbless gable? What about when he folds his hands or does a special? It's pretty damn tough to undo someone's hands, when you're not used to that. So we want to make sure people are able to hold up to the level. And in the meantime, I think I actually, I meant to touch on this earlier, one of my really, really long-time training partners, who I've seen every version of. He's been super pumped up, powerlifting. He's been, much lighter. He's done a lot of lifting, running, swimming, all kinds of different stuff. He's getting phenomenal results during this downtime. And his cardio might even be the best it's ever been. He's doing a couple days a week on the Airdyne bike. And very, very specific stuff. The classic intervals when I was coming up were 30 seconds on, balls to the wall crazy, 30 seconds off, short rest. Other people, change it up more. But that does seem, while nothing can ever replace live sparring and nothing's as good as live sparring, the Airdyne bike, for grappling at least, is giving a lot of guys during this downtime something that you can do at home. It's relatively, I think there might be more upscale models, but I think it's relatively inexpensive compared to some of the other stuff out there. And just really, really, I'm very impressed with the fact that rather than just, sitting around pissing and moaning, he's getting what's going to be to his benefit, an increase in a certain type of conditioning that he can either keep up, or if he goes back to the training, he'll be at a much less of a dip than he would have been, sitting there just waiting to get back to full rolling,
That's awesome, man. I'm glad you gave us that tips. Me specifically, I've been freaking worried about my cardio like a mother flower, dude. So I appreciate you coming on, man. And more importantly, I appreciate the no nonsense approach to all of this. Like, I know some other guys probably would have been like, "Oh yeah, and we'll get the grappling dummy and we'll do whatever." But I think we're all thinking the same thing here as martial artists. Like, we'll just wait, and when it's time to get back on the mat, we'll fight.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's if I've learned anything, it's not one size fits all. I've heard of people say, you know, that while a $500-600 dummy that's actually going to have the limbs that you're going to get something out of moving around on can be of benefit. You do that a couple days in a row, it's pretty tough to you know, suspend disbelief and motivate yourself to keep doing it. And the idea of, well, what if I forget all my jujitsu and everything else? I find watching the instructionals, I find thinking about it very, very helpful in keeping kind of the neural pathways, the mental aspects of it sharp, because you're not doing it. And doing it on a dummy is great. It's better than just thinking about it. But if you're honest with yourself, you're not going to get up, be going down to the basement at the time your class is taking place and putting in, you know, an hour and a half of beating the shit out of this dummy. And if you do, you're not going to do it again the next night and the next night or whatever your normal training schedule is. And even if you do it every night, when you go back, you'll certainly be better off than if you were sitting on the couch, but it's not like you're going to be more or less where you were. But there's some great discounted or even a couple free instructionals I've seen that guys are offering to try and help during this period. There's lots of good resources. Again, you know, no affiliation whatsoever with Hodger Gracie or his materials, but I've seen incredible benefit from the membership site he offers, which is HodgerGracieTV.com. Most instructionals and stuff you find on YouTube, very long, a ton of needlessly verbose explanation and 100 what ifs and everything. And whether it's his personality or he's got some technical director advising him, the Hodger stuff is, you know, 90 seconds to 2 minutes. He's giving you a literal lifetime, not just of training, but of fighting the top guys in jiu-jitsu, and not just edging them out, but beating them, submitting them, dominating them. And the details are drastically different. A lot of the moves he's showing, the way he's applying them or explaining to do them is very different than how I learned. Some of the stuff, I mean, I'm observing it, thinking about it, drilling it. It's coming out live a week, 2 weeks after, and other stuff, you know, I'm not able to make it work, but it's not at all dependent on being as tall as him, as heavy as him, anything else like that. It's just a categorically different way of applying common moves. There's no upside down, you know, reverse crazy crap, which some people love, but it's not what got him to, you know, all the world titles, every famous name you could imagine. If he's fought them, he's beaten them, and chances are he's beaten them in a way that no one else has ever beaten that person. It's very impressive to me that you don't reach black belt, you don't reach X amount of degrees and say, okay, I've kind of got to figure it out. If jiu-jitsu is anything, it's a never-ending journey, a puzzle that it's actually more fun and more rewarding when someone, as you're about to think, wow, the puzzle's almost done, somebody dumps 1,000 more pieces on top of it. That's like a torture, that's like something out of Saw or something. But in jiu-jitsu, it's awesome because it's like, wow, I am, you know, now a 2nd degree black belt, but I've never been successful from this kind of niche position, or this counter has never been something that I could figure out a counter to stop their counter. And it's very rewarding. And I think while the striking arts are incredibly important on their own, it's different when you're not going to discover too many new kicks in Muay Thai that you've never. You'll have infinite subtleties in the setups and the variety of how to use them, but chances are, you know, after a decade of Muay Thai, there isn't really a secret kick or something that's going to put, you know, give you one of those like, whoa moments where you can't imagine how's this been kept from you. And in boxing, even less so, even though the distance and the timing and those aspects of the striking arts are where you truly see the differences of the elites. You know, the distance and timing that most people never scratch the surface of mastering is incredible when you see it in action. But in jiu-jitsu, there really are stuff where you'll be training 25 years and you'll be like, I've never seen someone do that from this position. You have to show me where you got this. And that's like a routine thing. You know, that won't be once in a career. It's very cool. And then when myself or Professor Agnelli, Professor Denise, or now Professor Branch are teaching, they're going to be the first ones to say, I saw a student do something and I got to figure out what this was, or is this something that I can pick up and adapt and then develop for a little bit and then introduce it into my classes. For all your viewers and the gutter fighting community, please feel free at any point. If you'd like to come by when AMA is open, hopefully I'll be able to have some cool updates from Will. So with the new address, new everything, and first class is always free, no pressure, no obligation. Come in, try it out. Mention that you're from Gutter Fighting Secrets, and we'll hook you guys up. Take good care of you. Appreciate
that, man. Professor, thank you so much for coming on, agreeing to do this. Means a lot to us here, and definitely.
It was a good time, Will. Thanks for having me, and we'll do an update at some point with the new school.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, man. Guys, until next time, I want you to remember that you are your first and last line of defense, and I will catch you on the next Tactical Podcast. Cheers, guys.